Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Advanced 3-Point Editing and Trim Mode in Adobe Premiere. My name is Kamiran Begi, and we're going to spend about 3 hours today looking at Adobe Premiere Pro. I have Premiere Pro CC 2020 installed on my system, but if you have a different version of it, it makes no difference. To be honest with you, you could have a Premiere from, I would guess, from version 7 or 8, which is really old Premiere, because Premiere at the moment we're looking at version 14. And so about 15-16 years ago, everything I'm showing is doable on the older Premiere as well, with no problem whatsoever. Before we jump into our project today, I want to go over a few basic settings again. Make sure if you are doing any kind of editing with a higher quality footage, try to make sure you have a proper settings for your computer. Otherwise, a software only might be too much for a computer with the footages you're dealing with. 1080 or even 4K or higher can cause a bit of a problem and put a lot of stress. So make sure you have a computer with the proper GPU installed. For information about the GPU, just search for Adobe System Requirements in Google, Adobe Premiere System Requirements, and you will find Adobe help file right there directly that explains what kind of hardware do you need for Premiere. The reason I'm going over this thing right now is because the kind of editing we're going to do today, it's based on precision and based on a real-time playback, because you making decision on how the continuity and a timing between clips works. If your computer is slow and you see a kind of lag or a jitter when you playing the clip, then they give you a wrong impression about the kind of cut you're making. So as you can see here, the recommended memory used to be 8 gig, now it's a 16, and then now it's a 32 for a 4K or higher. It's the amount of memory you need. I would say anything Adobe says here as a recommended, you double it, because they need bare minimum for the settings. For example, here says 4 gigabyte memory for your video card. I would recommend get a video card with an 8 gigabyte memory built into it, right there. So it doesn't take. Otherwise, if you have a shared graphic card, a lot of people have on their computer, unfortunately, especially the laptops, all-in-ones. This Intel graphic cards use the main memory of your computer. So make sure at least you have a 32 gig or 64 gig, because your graphic card will take a large chunk of it. As you can see, it reserved half of my memory for a graphic card, but the other graphic card has its own memory, so it doesn't start eating away from your own memory. So everything above it becomes pointless if your GPU doesn't have a dedicated memory card. So yes, if you have a 4 gig minimum is fine, but the thing is, we connect it to a higher resolution monitor usually, or external, and your video card needs the memory to run the displays. That's right, the monitor needs a video card. So it's a bit tricky settings. That's what I said, grab every number you see in here, just double it to be able to work comfortably. Same thing goes with the Mac. There's no difference between them, and don't listen to the companies making hardware that telling you this will work. They try to just sell you stuff. And there's a list of graphic cards for Windows. As you can see, there's a lot of these graphic cards involved in there. The one I'm using right now is this one, the GTX 1070. Now, if you're playing a video game, then definitely the RTX 2080 Ti or 1080 Ti GTX, these are fast graphic cards. And if I compare them in a video game, this 1070 is not gonna is gonna be at 30% slower. But amazingly, there were tests online I've seen people done. and they had identical equipment with different graphic cards on it, and then just realized only 5% or 4% difference between them. And funny is the price range is, some of these things are double the price. It doesn't justify the performance between them. However, there's a big difference between the integrated graphic chips from Intel versus the basically the default or the standalone graphic cards. So these are a few things you may want to go double check your systems before you jump into any kind of advanced editing, especially with the trim tool and the 3-point editing. I'm going to create a folder in my 3-point editing here, and I'm going to select that folder and call this project. I think I'm going to call this thing cafeteria, or just cafeteria. I will go to my window workspace and I select my startup. My startup is a very minimalistic interface with Premiere. I have a program panel, I have a source panel with the effect controls and an audio mixer in there. And at the bottom, I have the project panel, the media browser, and the effects. That's all I need, and a timeline, of course, and my audio meters. So I'm going to go to media browser to import and look at my assets. So I'm going to go to my desktop, I believe is Eleco Online, and a folder is called Advanced 3-point Editing. I have two video clips here. These are a cafeteria scene from a movie called The Genesis Code. This is actually a Hollywood movie segment that I'm going to do the editing today. So I'm just going to grab these two clips and import them. And these clips been shot at 24 frames per second. However, the proxy resolution for these footages been set to 960 by 720 at aspect ratio 1.33. So what that means is the original footage was shot with a 4K red camera, and the settings of that red camera also had an aspect ratio of 1.33. 1.33 aspect ratio, basically, if you think about it, it's like a 16 by 9 aspect ratio that we use for the widest screen that people already know. So because 16 by 9 is easier to kind of sell it when it comes to marketing it, because remember our old rectangular TV were more like a 4 by 3 ratio, but 16 by 9 is the one they called wide, and the ratio is 1.33. Means if you divide these numbers, you get a 1.33 ratio. For more information about the picture aspect ratio and what these ratio they work, just simply go to Wikipedia, which I have a link here. And in Wikipedia, just search for anamorphic. Anamorphic format. There you go. And this will explain how the anamorphic and aspect ratio works. So this might at first be very confusing, but if you look at the film sensor or the lot of digital camera sensors, you probably have some of the SLR cameras. You can carefully open it and take a look at inside the sensor. You will realize the sensor of a camera is actually 4 by 3 ratio. A lot of photos are usually in that ratio. So the camera manufacturers, they create a 4 by 3 ratio because they want to take a photograph, and then what they do, they digitally stretch it to create a wider screen version. Now, of course, in the film time, they couldn't do that with a film because the original film was designed like that. I mean, if the Lumiere brothers, they decided to make a wider screen to begin with, they most likely will design a film differently. They made the film probably wider, and narrower. You're probably wondering why they don't shoot it wider on the film. Well, because you use a less emulsion and the resolution becomes lower. So they try to maximize it. That's what they do. So of course they use a lens called anamorphic. The anamorphic lens are stretched. This is how the digital analog lens is, but in the digital world, we just stretch the footages by using aspect ratio. Here's another example of the anamorphic lens. Now, a lot of cameras, when you look inside the lens is not like a cat eye, is not vertical. What it is just a normal circular lens. So this will call the anamorphic. Of course, as you can see, the aspect ratio is a very complicated scenario when you try to shoot a film or a movie, because as a cameraman, as a cinematographer, as a director, as a producer, these guys will sit down and talk about budgeting for a month, because it costs a lot of money if you select the wrong settings. You have to rent all the equipments. So sometimes they want to shoot a movie, the equipment is not available because nobody got the lens, they have to go with something else. That changes everything, the design, the set, and so on. So keep in mind that the footages that I import here is called a proxy. These are being converted by a method known as ingest. Now, because I want to save some time in this class, and I don't want to spend half an hour, 40 minutes to convert these files, these are already being converted as ingested. Otherwise, I had to do the proper ingestion using the ingest setting in Premiere. In ingest, I had to select the option as a transcode, and when I select the transcode, it grabs my original file, and I select, for example, one of the presets like Apple ProRes 422 or DNX from Avid or intro, AVC intro or GoPro or even a Sony XD-Cam. H.264 high bitrate is fine as long as your CPU, your computer supports it. And then I had to change the resolution, and the transcode automatically will convert the file from let's say 4K into much lower resolution. In this case, they made it for me into a 960 by 721.33 aspect ratio. The good news about the ingest is you guys can swap the clip at any time you want. I'll show you where the button is for it. So here's the first clip I have. Actually, let's start with a take 90. So I'm gonna play this video. I'm not gonna make this thing full screen. I know this is not fair, but if I make it full screen, most likely not gonna play as smooth as possible. I'll try to preserve some bandwidth. So I'm gonna play it just from this resolution. I want you guys to watch this thing. It's about 1 minute and 36 seconds. Then we're gonna look at the other one. Once you guys understand the clips and listen to them and you're familiar with the story, then we're gonna do the editing. So let's try.
Roger, 2 take 4. Hey, Marsha. Background. Action.
Hi, Blake Truman.
What's the know?
I'm Carrie Wells. I hope you don't mind if I sit down for a minute. So you're a classic lit major, huh?
What are you writing, a book?
No, actually, I'm with the school paper and I'm doing a story on Madison College's new hockey super track.
Well, aren't you the lucky one?
Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born?
This isn't going to be one of those who was born in log cabin and walked to school 6 miles uphill both ways epics, is it?
Somewhere to start, I'm sorry.
Why don't we just get the trivia and get right to the important part? You get to be so great stuff.
Okay. So where were you born?
Look, in order for this to be a really good story, there needs to be some serious empathy between the writer and the subject. Here, I'll show you. wasn't it?
Oh, classic clip and a steel trap memory.
So you guys saw this particular take 90, one of the, well, scene 90 from that camera angle. And this is the roll 90, scene number 2, take number 4. And this clip called Blake, because that character name is Blake. Now we're gonna look at the different take. This is a scene 91, take 2B, and let's take a look at this one. This is a same thing from a different angle, but the difference between video and a film production is in film, unless it's something important, like there's a car crash, they want to destroy a set, or the stunt is a complicated one and they just don't want to mess it up, or they don't have a budget to reset the place to redo it again. They might use a multiple cameras. The multiple camera in the movies, the problem is the lighting and the sound can be very tricky, because again, the microphone might show up from a different angle. So in movies, it's easier to let the actors to take a breathe, and then they move the camera, they move the light. This will take a couple of hours to reset the shot by moving all the lights and redo it again. Of course, the actors, after a couple of hours, they may not remember exactly what they've done. They usually review the digital film, which is nice, because the old times, that was just a film. They couldn't see what they've done. They had to use their own memory. So when you're watching this thing, this seems identical, but they're actually different. So let's take a look at this one.
Hi, Blake Truman?
Who wants to know?
I'm Carrie Wells. Hope you don't mind if I sit down for a minute. You're a classic lit major.
What are you writing, book?
No, actually, I'm with the school paper and I'm doing a story on Madison College's new hockey super jock.
Oh, aren't you the lucky one?
So, Blake, tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
Oh, this isn't going to be one of those he was born in a log cabin and walked to school 6 miles uphill both ways efforts, is it?
I have to start somewhere, I'm sorry.
Let's just skip the trivia and get right to the important part. The how'd you get to be so great stuff.
Okay. Where were you born?
In order for this to be a really good story, there needs to be some serious empathy between the writer and the subject. I'll show you. Carrie, wasn't it?
Classic lit and a steel trap memory.
Tell me, Carrie. How's your love life? You hooking up with anyone special right now?
I don't think that's any of your business.
Well, but it is. See, the empathy thing. Getting the interviewer and the interviewee. So, are you?
I was, if you must know.
Was, huh? Was it serious?
So at first seems like, wow, it's an identical clip. It feels like there are two cameras shooting the same thing, but they are actually very different. Show you, for example, a simple thing. Look for a part about the comic books. Okay, that's probably one of the easiest thing you guys can, because listening to the conversation might be a little bit tricky, but look at the way she's grabbing the comics from the table.
I see you're a classic lit major.
What are you writing, book?
No, actually, I'm with the school paper and I'm doing.
And the way he's putting it down, he says, "What are you writing a book?"
No, actually, I'm with the school paper and I'm doing a story.
So if I show you the other clip from the same area, the way she grabs it is very different.
I see you're a classic lit major.
What are you writing, a book?
No.
Did you see it? The way he just grabbed the comics and it just basically slapped it right on a table. Watch again.
In a book?
No.
And the other one, it's completely different. He's holding it.
No, actually, I'm with the school paper and I'm doing a story on.
And gently put it down. Again, these are being scripted and they rehearse a couple of times, and they've done multiple shots. I have only these two available at the moment, and we're gonna use these two. These were the best ones. The director and the editor, they decided to go with these two takes. Our job now is to use these two and line them up. Basically, I'm gonna do the editing, seems or feel like it's a multicam. There are two cameras. Of course, you will see a lot of little details are mismatching. The way he grabs the comic. So if you're doing a cut right there, this cut's not gonna line up, because in a one take he's putting the comics down like that, or he's still holding it. Remember, what she's saying is something, and then the other camera, she said she are in the middle of the saying something, and the comic books is down on the table. These things happen a lot in the editing, and we try to minimize the amount of the headache. Now, before we start with the actual 3-point editing and a trim mode, I have to go over some of the basic rules about the tools we're going to use. The thing about the trim mode is, in trim mode, I have to go to the edit preferences and adjust some of my preferences in the Premiere before I do anything. I'm gonna start by adjusting my appearance, the brightness. My audio is fine. I'm not gonna mess with the audio today due to the I'm using a microphone at the moment, you guys, and the speakers, so everything being shared. But I just want to make sure when I'm scrubbing, the audio setting is correct. Play audio while scrubbing, and the automatic waveform generation is good. If you don't have that thing, then you're not going to see the audio waveform. That's a very bad idea if you turn this thing off. I'm going to leave everything else as is. The autosave, I don't really care at the moment, but mine for reference is set to every 10 minutes for 200 backup projects maximum. And I'm not backing things on a cloud, despite I can. I'm not going to do that. Let me go to the media tab. Under the media tab, I have few settings that I need to adjust. For example, my frame count starts at 0, but Premiere also can read the time code from the actual clip. So some of the time codes are weird. For example, if you guys can look at that side, it says 0105 da 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 da. That's the original time code. This is my timeline time code. So it's slightly different, but I can just change it again to the time code conversion, or start from a 1. I'll leave it to the default. Unfortunately, the default media time code is 29.97 drop frame, but this video or a film is shot at 23.97. As you can see, the frame rate is there, but this is a film, not a video. I know when we convert it, it has a drop frame time code, so I'm going to leave it to the 23.97 due to the frame number that I have right here. I'm taking all the information from the actual footage, and I change that settings to the correct one. So, for example, if I add titles or something else, the time codes will match. Under the media cache, I better go and delete all my garbage files. This will free up a couple of 100 gigabytes of a hard drive of the previous project. I mean, I've been working with Premiere since Monday. So this is my 3rd day teaching with Premiere in multiple sessions I've done, and I haven't cleaned this thing yet. So I got to do this thing to clean the mess. Make sure your performance is the default optimized for editing, and I have the minimum amount of memory dedicated to the other application. Maximum is designed for Premiere. Under the playback, this is very important because we're going to use something called a pre-roll and post-roll. I most likely change this thing to 3 and 3 because each movie and each video is different. If it was a fast action scene, I might have done it at 1 and 1 and 2 and 2. But in this case, the pace is a little slow, so I'm going to go with a 3 and 3. By default, usually I enable my Mercury transmit. That means I will send the final output to the second monitor. Unfortunately, my second monitor being used for broadcasting this thing. The GoToMeeting app is my second monitor, so I won't be able to enable it, but usually I do when I do the editing. And I'm gonna go to the timeline, making sure I'm not gonna use the transitions, but if you are, I'm just gonna make sure my video and audio set to the 1 second, and definitely the timeline auto scroll set to the page scroll. You do not want to change that. You do not want to change that one because it makes you feel dizzy and seasick if you select a smooth scroll. And no scroll is a bad idea. And I want to use a mouse wheel as a vertical one. That is good. Audio use as a default. And down here, there's a couple of things. A snap playhead in timeline when a snap is enabled is absolute. I don't want to mess with this thing because I will turn the snap on a timeline on and off quite a bit in the trim mode. So I need to make sure a snap is on and off by clicking the magnet. Also, at the end of a timeline, I do not want my playhead to return to the start. So I'm going to turn this thing off. Probably the most important settings in the preferences that I need to adjust is display out of sync indicator, because we're going to using ripple, roll, the trim mode, and so many other tools to get these two footages lined up. Most likely accidents do happen and we may make the clip going off sync. At least this will display the numbers on the clip telling us that, yeah, we need to fix the out of sync problems. Play after render previews, I don't really care about that. You guys can turn it on and off, doesn't matter. I don't use the previews anymore. I used to because faster graphic cards, I don't need it to. And last is called the trim. The trim is a method of editing and is a panel in Premiere that in my normal video classes, I don't teach it. Even the advanced cinematic Premiere, I don't teach that. I only teach the trim in the advanced studio techniques called the refine editing or second studio level 2. In the trim mode, there is a large trim offset of a 5 frame. Now, I sometimes change that number to a bit larger, like a 10 frames. Depends on what the content of the video is. There is another option here, says allow selection tool to choose roll and ripple trims without modifier key. Now, this becomes a bit tricky because if you select or click on a wrong spot of a clip, you might go in from a roll to the ripple. Now, you'll be going to understand like why the trim mode is very tricky and very complicated, because you are using trim, roll, and ripple, a slip and a slide all at the same time. Now, a lot of us are not very comfortable with some of these tools because you might say, I love roll and rolling tool is a great tool, but I'm not feeling comfortable with the ripple because I had a bad experience with it. Well, the bad news is in a trim, you got to use all of them at the same time. So there is a bit of a trick in there to making sure things are on the right spot. I don't want to automatically select anything by moving a mouse on it. So I'm going to use a modifier shortcut. You guys can enable it, but I don't. Allow current tools to change trim type of previously selected edit point. That's fine. And shift clicks that overlap trim points for no, I don't need to do that. And I'm just going to click OK. Now, a review about the Premiere tools. I'm just going to grab this clip. I'm not really making in and out point or anything. I'm just going to drag a clip here to let me clean up my timeline. Again, this is just a test about certain tools, and I'm going to talk about in Adobe Premiere. Also, I need to go to my sequence and turn the selection follow the playhead. This becomes very annoying. Okay, I'm going to turn the audio off so it doesn't bug anybody. First of all, the tools we're going to talk about is starting with a trim. The trim tool itself is the arrow tool or selection tool. The good news about the trim is when I place it at the very beginning of the clip or at the end of the clip, you guys can see that the tool becomes a bracket with a red arrow on it. With the trim, I can just trim the end of a clip and it's kind of cool and no problem. Now, this is a very useful tool, especially if you're having an audio clip that you need to adjust, or you probably have something like a title. Let me just type something here. If I zoom into the timeline, you guys can see I just used a shortcut for zoom, right? If I zoom into the timeline, I just want to make sure my text is longer, the duration wise. Well, I need to use the selection tool, and I grab the beginning or the front of it just like this, and I pull it away from the beginning. Now my text stays longer. If I want to make the text way shorter, I will do the exactly opposite. And now the text is much shorter. Now the trim is very useful because the trim doesn't affect anybody else's. So for example, if I have a second title, on top of that, I purposely put the playhead here. So when I type in, Premiere will create a new track. If my playhead was, for example, here, then a Premiere would have most likely leave the title inside the same one. So I'm just going to double click here and type something else. So you will see if I use the trim, it's very predictable. I can line up both of the titles at the very end of each other, and thanks to the snap, they snap together. Really easy. So I can have something look like this. Again, I'm not trying to design anything in a particular way. Again, this is not about a design. It's about how the trim works independently from each track. That's why we use a trim a lot. However, when it comes to the actual video clip, trim is actually a very bad idea. For example, if you have a clip that has a cut in the middle of it. Oh, by the way, the moment I cut this thing, you guys can see two little arrows there. The white arrows pointing at each other right at the cut. This is called the option show through edit. You must have the show through edit enabled. I better select my timeline, otherwise you won't see it. There we go. You see some things in Premiere, if you're on a different panel, some of the options are not available because show through edit is only available in the timeline. So you got to make sure your timeline is selected, otherwise it's not enabled. So what is exactly show through edit means? Show through edit, if I turn it off, you will see a cut right there, right here. The cut, without seeing the two arrows like this, there are two arrows pointing at each other. These two arrows right in the middle of the cut tells you that these cuts, that the cut I just made was completely unnecessary. I cut something that I shouldn't have, or made no difference whatsoever, because the frames are sequential. For example, if you think about the frame number in the previous cut was 1022, at the cut, the next one is 1023. So the frames are sequentially corrected and continuity is there, and basically means I didn't need it. That's why I put the show through edits. So if I make a cut, if that cut is unnecessary, it show it. But the moment I change the trim it, those triangles disappear because now the frames are not sequential. The frames are sequential, now they're not. So let me cut it again, and you will talk about the trim. Trim, I can grab the end of this clip and I trim it backwards. This trim, as you notice that the mouse, I put it right in the cut, and I'm a little bit lean towards the left side. Towards the left side, the arrow pointing to the left. That means I am trimming the outgoing of this clip. The outgoing of this clip. Now, if I move the mouse slightly to the right side, you will see the trim moves to the other way. That means I am trimming the in point or incoming of the next clip. How? This way, I cannot drag the mouse. This is pointing to the left, the outgoing. As you can see, the bracket is this way. I cannot drag this thing to the right side. Look, I'm stuck because there's a clip in front of it. And if you guys look at the time code on the top, the time codes are sequential. 01, 05, 30, 04, 05 on the right side. But if I click and drag it to the left, I can trim it right to the cut here. As you can see, the numbers are different. 02 versus 28, 02 versus 30, 05. When I let the mouse go, first of all, you lost a triangle because they are not through edits anymore. They're not sequentially correct. The problem with the trim is it creates a gap. And a gap is not a good idea because if I play it, of course, we got nothing unless you have a plan for it. So in this case, I have to close the gap. Usually you're going to say, well, it's simple. I can grab this clip and pull it forward. Well, yes and no. In reality, if you have a bunch of clips there on a timeline, like you have multiple cuts, then you have to grab one by one and pull it. So grabbing a clip and pull it forward is not a good idea usually, unless you have a one clip. I recommend at least use an option called single track. This will select everything on the right side. At least you don't have to worry about selecting individual clips. Also, you can zoom out by hitting the backslash and use the arrow keys if you're not comfortable with the selection and make a marquee like this to select everything else. You could have hundreds of cuts in there, by the way. You don't know when you need to trim something, right? And at what stage. Again, editing video, it's more like writing a resume. That there is a format in a CV or a resume that you do that. But while you're making a draft, a rough draft of your resume for the first time, I know a resume is something we all done before and we already have a copy somewhere. But if you cannot find yours and you try to write a new one, you definitely need to edit it quite a bit and add and remove stuff. And then sometimes you forgot something when sometimes you have too much stuff. So you need to do a good editing on it. Editing of the video is the same thing. Sometimes you don't know when you want to remove. Sometimes you need to add something. In this case, I can just also right click and select ripple delete. The problem with this thing is everything looks good. As you can see, nice and neat, they're tied up at the end. But let's just say I decided I trimmed it too much. I want to untrim it. Here's a problem that starts from this point. I cannot push it forward to push this clip away. So that means I have to grab this clip with whatever method you're comfortable with. I don't care. You want to drag it with an arrow, you want to make a marquee, you want to use this multi-track selection tool, doesn't matter. You need to move this clip to the right. Why? Because I need to open up the room. The question is how much room I need to open. That's the question. I open up and I have no idea what the next frame look like. As you can see, the next frame is blank because I need to open up the room. So line up the two frames is out of question. So that you guys can understand the problem with the trim itself. And then I have to pull it back again and go through the dance and watch the whole thing. Say, oh yeah, maybe the cut is not good. Maybe there's a jump in there because she's just looking a little bit nervous right there. Her arm was down here. The next thing you know, it jumps. So as you can see, there are problems with this. Who can save us from this mess is called the ripple. Now, ripple tool has its own problems. Ripple look kind of identical to the trim mode or the selection tool, except when you go on a clip, you guys can see a red slash on it because trim only works when the playhead and the cut are. So I'm going to move my playhead away because it's easier. And when I place my trim on it, or sorry, ripple, I can do the same ripple. The good news is when I ripple it back, Ripple creates no gap, which is great. Then I can push it forward and it does the same thing. Look, no problem. And I can see both frames. So if I need to line up her arm under, or her fist under her chin, I can just do that easily because I can see 2 frames at the same time. However, there's a problem with the ripple. For example, if I pull the ripple here, everything looks great. Sometimes when you push the ripple, look what happened. Oops, I'll do it again. Here, let me create a marker on the timeline. I'm gonna call this thing test point for title. My marker is exactly at 38:18. 38:11. I don't know where the 18 came from. Look what happens when I pull the ripple backwards. Did you see that it moved? My playhead is not moving. My playhead was at 38:11. So when I ripple it, playhead stays at 38:11. It moved the actual marker, the timeline marker moved with it. So if I have something in here, right here, on this title, and this title itself has a marker as well on. I'm just going to go with a white marker so you guys can see the markers, 2 of them. This marker and that marker lined up because I lined them up for a purpose earlier. Then I go and grab a ripple and I ripple something up. Look what happens. The markers stay because the ripple pulled everybody backwards. But now it's off sync with my playhead. Then I pull this one forward. And you see what it does? The ripple, doesn't matter what direction I'll push and pull in the ripple, it can move things back and forth. The worst thing gonna happen if I grab another clip and I ripple it like this. Look what it does. It creates a mess. So everything I've done earlier can get very, very messy. I can push it forward. I'll try to bring this thing back like this, right in the middle. That's right, I cannot bring a cut right in the middle of it anymore. The cut cannot be adjusted. And my timecode is lost now. It used to be 38:11. Now is the marker is somewhere else. Premiere, move it back and forth, but I cannot line up this cut with this marker anymore. Brings us to the next tool called the roll. So what's a roll? Roll is literally a 2 trims back to back. By grabbing a roll, I can move the cut back and forth. As you can see, roll is a very safe tool to move things around. If some of you remember in a basic Premiere class when I teach, I said there are 5 tools in editing that we always use in a certain order. The first tool is called the trim. Now the trim is also the selection tool, right? The second tool, I better put this thing in the middle with a proper. The second tool we use is a ripple. The third tool usually we use in the editing is called a slip. The fourth tool we use is called slide. And the fifth tool we use is called roll. Now it doesn't matter what type of video editing program do you use. Are you using Avid Media Composer? You're using the DaVinci from Resolve from Blackmagic. You are using the Speed Razor. You're using Sony Galaxy or Sony consumer version called Sony Vegas, Adobe Premiere, Final Cut. It doesn't matter. The tools are worked like that. It's just look as carpenters. They tell you when you're building or you're carving something or you're building a coffee table, you have to use a certain tools in a certain order. Otherwise, you get damage the material, you get damage the wood, the edge is not soft. Same thing with the sandpaper. You got to keep going finer and finer and finer. Otherwise, you end up with a rough edges. These are the tools that we have to use in a certain order. Now, of course, roll is one of the last one we use. Why is a safe one? Because it just moves the cut. Now, what the trim mode is and how we're going to use it is a tricky part. Because if I double click on the edge of the cut, you're going into a trim mode. As you notice that this trim mode is very different. It's the same panel as a normal Premiere, but it's called the trim mode. In trim mode, I have a bunch of icons at the bottom. If you remember in the preferences, I changed my minimum and the maximum forward and the backwards trim to -10 and +10, but there's a -1 and +1 in the middle. There's an apply transition, and when I place the mouse at the middle of a cut, you guys can see it's called the roll. But if I move it slightly to the left or the right, the tool changes into a ripple immediately. You have to be very careful. If I hold the control key or command key, I go into a trim. This is a trim. Look, I made a gap right here on a timeline with a trim. And now when I trim it forward, it fixed the gap and it can push it forward. If I place it right there, this can work again as a normal trim tool. Now it's a ripple. As you can see, pulling everybody back. So trim is a tricky one because you can easily create a gap because it feels unpredictable. It is very predictable what you're doing with the tool itself, okay? But you have to be careful which panel you're selecting. Am I at the beginning of it or end of it? As I said, this is a very tricky one. So let's start by doing a basic editing. Again, we're gonna talk about the trim more carefully. As you can see, it can get very messy if you don't know what you're doing with it. So all said and done, let's just start by fixing and creating and proper editing. I'm just gonna remove my clear all my markers, and I'm good to go. We're gonna use quite a bit of markers, so maybe I should go to the window and grab my markers panel just to be sure. Markers, where are you? Right there. Just let you know, for some of you guys who just joined us in this session, if you want to do a proper editing of these two clips that I have here, I would say the proper editing of these two clips may take about a week. So I have, right now is almost like 2 hours left, 2 hours and 10 minutes. Oh, let's just say we're going to take a 15 minutes coffee break. I have roughly about less than 2 hours. I'm going to make a good rough cut. But if I want to really do the editing, I have to sit down and spend a lot more time. So I want you guys to understand the tricks I'm using here, how to get this thing done. A lot of these tricks I'm showing you, you have to really go to the YouTube and dig in there, try to find one piece at a time. But there are information on editing like this is definitely available. So I'm starting with the first clip, the scene 90. So I'm going to play it.
Roger, 224.
Now the problem with this scene is this, because I'm only seeing Blake here on the clip, and the director says action. You guys probably can hear him right there. It's coming up.
Background, action.
See, the problem with that one is the action starts, and I have no idea where to start with this thing because look, the girl's supposed to show up in here, right? Now, if I make an in and out point, I'm really messing things up in here. So I'm going to start with the other clip. This one is easier. Why? because you remember the key point in here is this girl walking, Carrie walking to the table. So the guy is just looking at these books, so I don't really care about that scene yet. So I'm gonna start with this clip. I know it's wrong, but I will show you a little trick to swap them later. So I'm gonna start again. This is my rough cut. I'm gonna start with the moment she's started walking when the director's action. I'm making an in point, and I'll go to the end of it.
Was it serious?
Let's just say up to here. This clip was much longer, by the way. It was like a 3 minutes shot, and I only cut it to the one because, again, I noticed that in the class when I teach this thing, students, they struggle with the first 10 seconds, 15 seconds of it anyway, because the rest of it is the same thing. I will create a timeline from this. Now, this is called my A-roll clip. For example, I know there's no A or B-roll involved, so I'm just going to call this thing, not final, but I'm just going to call this thing a rough cut 1, RC1. Because I might have a multiple version of this thing later on. I don't know. So let's get rid of all the unwanted audio and video clips because I don't need any empty tracks. Also, I'm going to push this thing up, make my audio very, very large because I'm going to heavily rely on editing through the audio. I don't really need to see my project panel. Usually when I do these sorts of editing, I will get rid of my project panel because in this case, I need to really focus on these two clips. I already have the clips in here. So for the sake of having a markers, I'm gonna keep this panel here. Otherwise, I'll usually get rid of these things and place them inside my timeline. I need more of a timeline, trust me. Something like this. I hit a backslash, so now I'm good to go. I don't need to see my source panel as much, so I'm making it almost identical to the size of my program panel. Let's take a look of the timeline.
Hi, Blake Truman?
Who wants to know?
So I need to go to the other clip. Remember, I need to create something known as establishing shot. Establishing shot means as she's walking in here, look, she's walking to the cafeteria. She look a bit right there. She recognized the guy that she needs to interview, and she walks towards him. I need to add this clip right after it. Here's my problem. This clip needs to be added right there. So I need to make a 3-point editing. The problem in here is how I'm going to do that because I don't see her in this clip as she walks in there. I can make a mistake and I can ruin things. So you're wondering what options I have. Well, first of all, I have multiple options. I have an option of markers. I can mark her in here, and I mark this clip here, and somehow get the ball rolling in a way. But I got a better idea that usually works really well. It's called gang. So what exactly gang is? Gang is I can lock the source and a program together. So basically, I don't see her here. My assumption, by the way, in here is girl, Carrie, she walks with the same speed and the same continuity. That's my so let's take a look. Again, if Carrie's here, I don't really see her outside of a screen. So I gotta wait until she walks into the screen that is visible. So I'm gonna play this thing until she walks to the table right there. She stops here when she says hi. So I'm gonna go back here, right there. Now let me just say these are roughly the same spot. If we are a little bit off here, we can just use a slip or a slide to kind of fix it. What I do from this point, I'll go to my source panel and I select gang, source, and program. When I gang, source, and program, that means if I pull my playhead backwards on my timeline, my source panel will go back exactly with the same thing. Look. You see? So the thing is, if I want to create a establishing shot, when she is looking at here, right there, I know where the proper timeline roughly is for it. I know it's around this air spot. I'm not going to guess it. So what I would do is, on my timeline, I press I on the keyboard to create an endpoint because I want, maybe, you know what? I'm going to go a little bit more forward. But the moment she's looking, she's running, I'm going to create an endpoint right there. And I'm going to play it until she appears here on this shot. Right there. Right there. She shows up in the scene. I'm making an out point. Then I use my playhead and I need to go to the in point of a cut. Why? Because in the rule of 3-point editing, you need a 3-point of reference. I have point 1 on my timeline, which is right here. I have the point 2 on my timeline, which is here. But the point 3 comes from the playhead, known as a 3-point editing. Now, in 3-point editing, this playhead, if I choose the override shortcut, which is right here, what happens is Premiere will use this point, place it at top of the in point, always does that, and then goes forward and trim this thing. This is basically gonna ruin everything I've done. So I have to be very, very careful that my playhead on a timeline has to be an in point when I do the 3-point editing. Shortcut is Shift I. There we go. Now this cut from here will be placed at the beginning of the 3-point editing. I gotta make sure my audio is off because I don't want to have a double audio or double echo audio. If you want to keep the two audios separately, I also recommend do something like this. This is useful because if you want audio from this clip or the other clip, you have them both. Here, you have to rely on a perfectly lip sync. So I turn the A1 off, but I go and create a new audio track. One audio after audio 1. Then I select the audio track number 2, and I select my source and I drag it over, or you guys can actually, don't need to really drag it, you can actually click also there too. I drag it because it used to be dragging, and it's a habit. I remember somebody asked me last time I was teaching Premiere, why you dragging it? The answer is a habit, an old habit. So now, if I just click on override, done. Now you're wondering, why don't you put it on a top layer, like on the top? Well, I just explained it a few minutes ago. If I put it on the top right here instead, then the tool called ripple and a roll, a slip and a slide, everything I just showed you becomes useless. And a trim mode, I can't even use a trim mode anymore because the trim only works when the clips are back to back, just like this. So if I play it, sorry about one thing. I forgot to create an endpoint on the timeline. In a 3-point editing, you need 3-point reference, right? So here it is. Let's take a look. I'm gonna leave both this audio. I'm gonna mute it. I'm gonna solo this one only, so you guys can only hear one audio track. Let's take a look.
Hi,
Do you see how it look like? I know on timeline in here, when I play it on my machine is much smoother than for you guys watching it online, but you see the continuity is correct because I did not mess with this clip. This clip that he is watching, he is sitting here, has a proper continuity with this clip because I basically use the same timing. So she's not walking slower or faster. If you want to do that, then you can just trim it differently. But I just want to keep it exactly the way the director liked it.
Hi.
Now, I know this is a terrible cut, going from this to this.
Hi.
Don't worry about it. Remember, I'm still doing the trim mode in the 5 stages I showed you. I'm in a basic trim. I haven't get to the ripple, which is difficult. You should not use a ripple here, because ripple kind of destroy everything I just done with the gang and the source. Remember, I'm trying to synchronize the clip, and a ripple push and pulling things. So that's not gonna help me at all. I'm gonna leave it as is. I'm gonna play the next one. And remember, all of these cuts can be fixed with the roll. You want to see how the roll works? Just a little taste of it. Here, if I select the rolling tool, let's just say you guys want to shift the cut.
Hi.
I can shift it forward so you can see the girl from a side angle.
Hi. Blake Truman.
Or on the word when she said Blake Truman.
Hi. Blake Truman.
Right there. Or you want to do it just a little bit before this. It's a magic, isn't it? It feels like these two clips are shot with the two cameras and they were in a multicam editing mode. It's not.
Hi.
There. I can line them up again thanks to the tool with the roll. I'm again jumping through 10 steps already. But to show you, at first might look weird, but eventually it looked correct.
Hi. Blake.
So I'm going to leave it the way I had it earlier, because I have to do a lot of them. So let's take a look at the next one.
Hi. Blake Truman.
Who wants to know?
So the part that says, who wants to know?
Blake Truman.
Who wants to know?
Of course, when it says who wants to know, I'd rather to have him appear in there. Now, if you look at this clip inside the source, you realize his lips doesn't line up.
Hi. Blake Truman. Blake Truman.
I'm going to show you guys a little trick. If I want to hear the audio from a second track, I hold the Alt key and I grab the audio and I pull it forward. If you guys watch this thing, you hear there's a slight discrepancy and there's an echo in the audio.
Blake Truman.
Who wants to know?
Now let's take a look.
Hi. Blake Truman.
Who wants to know? Wants to know?
Because again, there are two different takes and the audio is off. So in here, when he said, who wants to know? I am very, very close to the original. So what I would do in here is I literally create an endpoint and I go forward.
Who wants to know?
And I stop before she said something else. Right there. And I make a cut. Again, I create an in and out point. On the timeline, again, thank God these guys are locked into each other. So I press Shift I to go to the in point. Then I need a new in point from this part. When I play the source, I need to find who wants to know.
Wants to know.
Not bad. It works. So here it is. In this case, again, what I would do is sometimes a little bit easier in this exercise to just match the audio side by side like this. I'm going to show you guys, even the way I'm doing it, even I get rid of this audio track completely. This one, I'm going to just delete it to show you, even with the audio being cut from one scene to another scene, the continuity is correct because I'm paying attention to the dialogue and how the clip works. And here it is, override. Now let's take a look.
Hi. Blake Truman.
Who wants to know?
There we go. See how smooth it is?
Hi. Blake Truman.
Who wants to know?
I'm very well.
See how well it actually lines up?
I'm very well. So you don't.
I know you guys watching it online at more like a slower frame rate and it's very stuttery and because of a connection, but you guys can hear the audio continuity is perfect.
Like trying.
What's to know?
I'm very well.
And the good news is, thanks to the gang between source and a program, if I turn my snap off earlier, make it a lot easier for me to move it between the cuts. Now, as you can see, this is the same clip. Therefore, the source and a program, they gang together, they are perfectly synchronized. However, what's interesting is the next one. I have to pay attention to where her arm is. Her face is a little bit off as well. These all can be fixed with the roll later on. Of course, this is a good cut. I want it from this angle.
I'm very well. So you don't.
Now, here the thing is she's sitting. Wow. They're actually not bad. See, she sits almost the same thing. Either she's a very, very good actress, which I've never seen her in any other movies. Some of you probably can refresh my I'm sure some of you are on the IMDb already checking for the Genesis code information IMDb, or maybe in a coffee break you will do that and find out what's her name, what kind of movie she plays. But she's not a, and the guy, same thing. I haven't seen them anywhere in a major movie, so not an A-list actor or actresses. And this was a low budget movie anyway. However, the director actually did a good job and directing them. And as you can see, these are way different takes, and she's almost doing the same thing.
I'm very well. I'm very well.
So let's watch this part.
I'm very well. So you don't. I'm going to sit down for a minute.
Of course, here's the thing. She's sitting down, great. But I don't need this solo for a second. Watch again.
I'm very well. So you don't. I'm going to sit down for a minute.
It's too much going on there, and I want to look at the other clip. I want to see what the guy Blake does. So all I have to do is select the source panel and literally move my playhead back a little bit and watch this cut.
What's to know?
I'm very well. So you don't.
I like his impression. Look at his impression. Right there. So the problem is, I like this impression he does, and I would like to change that cut somewhere around here. Unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe I should say, we're not looking at her face here. So when she said, "Do you mind if I sit here?" I don't see her face. So even I'm off by a couple of frames, and it's not 100% perfect synchronized, we should be okay. And by the way, I can resync it, eh? I don't need to stay with the original sync between a gang and a program, because remember, I guessed it where she was walking through the screen. Then here, I can move the playhead back a little bit and find out exactly where she's sitting. You see on my source panel, she's already sat down, and on my program, she's about. So I'm going to remove the gang source and program. Now they're independent, just like a normal Premiere. By the way, I need to get rid of my endpoint. So if you're doing these sorts of things, you need to go create a sets of shortcuts to get rid of the endpoints rapidly. For example, I'm going to go to the Edit Keyboard Shortcuts, and to remove the endpoint, clear, not the clean, clear, mark in. Maybe I should just say clear in is a Control-Shift-I. Now I rather to use a shortcut for this thing like this. You see it? When I hold the Alt or Option on my old Mac, Option I was removing in point and Option O removing out point. This might becomes a bit of a problematic in Windows, but it still is fine. I don't need to remove the original keyboard shortcut. I grab the clear in and I just use the clear in and drag it over the I. Now, as you can see, I have a mark in when I press I. If I hold the Alt I, becomes clear in. Same thing with the clear out. I grab it and drag it over the O. So normal O is a mark out, but Alt O clears it out. Also, I have another shortcut here called, I think called play around. Play around shortcut, I believe, is a Shift K in Premiere by default. I changed mine to a slash. We need to use that quite a bit when you do the editing. The reason I don't like a Shift K, because Control K, it adds the cut, is actually cutting the timeline like with a razor blade. So sometimes Shift and a Control are very similar to each other. You might actually click on the wrong one. So I'm just gonna be careful with this thing. So back to what I had. I need to line up these two clips. She's already sitting down, so I'm just going to grab my timeline and I'm going to go forward until she sits there. The moment she sits, now I can go back and enable the source and the program to gang them. When I gang them, now I look like a multicam. Watch. So if you need to line them up again, no worries. I'm not kidding, but wow, look at her lips here when she said I am from a timeline. That actually looks pretty good. So I'm going to play it.
I'm Carrie Wells.
I like make a cut like that. When she said I'm Carrie Wells.
Carrie Wells.
Now, the rest of it is just a little messy there with the audio. Right there. So I don't mind about the rest of the audio, but I like to make a cut right in the middle. Right here. After she said Carrie Wells. So, you know the rules already. I'm just going to create an endpoint. Go forward. When she said sit down for a minute, remember, I don't know where my out point is. My out point based on Blake's reaction when he's saying, sure, whatever. So again, I don't know where. I need him to make that reaction right there. But I have to be careful with her arm. See, she's pointing to the comics, but she's reaching it for it later. So I need to pull this thing back, making sure her arm is away. So as you can see, in this method of editing, I have a limit with how the actors behaving and how they're moving. This is not bad. Again, I gotta watch out for her right arm. Notice that her right shoulder on the source and the right shoulder on the program. Right there. This one actually looks pretty good because she looks like reaching from her purse to pull something. I'm gonna go with this part. And Blake is actually done with it. So this is my limit. I'm gonna make out point. I'm going to use a shortcut Shift I to go to the endpoint. Then on my source panel, I make a new endpoint. I use the override. Now, before I use an override, in this case, I need to listen to this conversation here because we listened to this part multiple times. Listen to this, the audio from this clip. And now let's listen to this one. Sounds identical to me very much. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace the audio anyway. As I said, you guys can completely remove the audio and leave it to this thing, but in this case, makes no difference. So let's take a look.
I'm Carrie Wells.
Perfect. Perfect. I am very happy. Again, she sits.
I'm Carrie Wells.
Now remember, if you don't like the way she's sitting or a cut is, we're gonna roll it later. Again, this is I'm just making a rough cut at the moment. But this rough cut, to be honest with you, is actually pretty good.
Flight trim?
What's the no?
I'm Carrie Wells.
You know what's the interesting thing is? Before we take a 15 minutes coffee break, I gotta tell you guys this thing. I've never seen that movie. That's right. I've never seen the movie called The Genesis Code. Never seen it. And if you guys, I'm not sure even is on Netflix or something. If you guys find it, you can watch the whole thing. It's about a guy named Blake, apparently, because I have a footages from he's a hockey player, and there's a scene from the I teach this usually in Adobe Premiere cinematic class. Sorry, the second part of the Premiere Advanced Studio Techniques. There is sections about the hockey. Maybe I should go to my media browser so you guys can see some of the clips in there, and they give you some sort of idea about this this movie, because the more you know about what you're editing, of course, helps a lot to understand the context. So here it is, a media, and I go to the hockey, and these are the clips from the movie. So anyway, this is a different kind of editing requires for the game. There's a body check, there's a score, there's a crowd, and there's a bunch of clips we have to do the editing. We usually do this thing in the studio techniques class. And then there's a bar scene. The bar scene is a tricky one, if you ask me, because in a bar scene, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of characters. There's a lot of joke going on there. You have to, I teach this thing, I teach a tool in here with a slip and a slide, because the clips has to be perfectly synced, and the only way you can do that is using a tool called a slip and a slide. And that's the bar scene. Again, creating a rough cut for these things are much, much, much longer. So when the students come into that class, usually what I do, I give them a rough cut already. So you already have a rough cut that being placed in some basic form. You just gotta refine it, because putting it together in 3-day class, it's impossible to do. And as you can see, I have multiple lessons for this thing. And the cafeteria is the one that you and I are doing right now. You can see how complex even the cafeteria, the project is at the moment. So after I've done a multiple of these things, I might do a couple of more after we're coming back. At least I go a little bit more farther than this thing. Then I will talk about the trim and how we're going to use the trim panel to refine the edge and make sure the timing is perfect. So I'm gonna continue with the next part. I'm just gonna zoom into my timeline a little bit more. I need to see the audio better, so this should make it a little bit easier to see. So let me play this part again.
What's your classical major?
Now, the next part I'm going to take a look is when he is reaching for the comics. As you can see in the source, she's holding the comics, and she's doing actually quite a good job of flipping it. Let's see.
Major, huh?
What are you writing a book?
Now, I think I did a decent job of synchronizing it.
What are you writing a book?
I would go with a part where it says, "Are you writing a book?" And I would want to change the cut from here to him, because
A book?
No, actually.
right there. So I would go with this part.
Criteria classic major.
What are you writing a book?
I would go for it. That's the safest bet for me. So I'll go with the in point here.
No, actually, I'm with the school paper at this.
Again, don't know exactly the paper goes. Look, the way he's already trashed the book here, or the comics, but here is holding it. So I'm gonna go with the, again, I have a limit until he puts the comics down here.
I'm with the school paper and the story on that.
And there's a problem after that. His face is up and he's actually writing something down.
Madison College's new hockey super chat.
I just gonna go forward until she finished talking here.
His new hockey super chat.
Remember, later on I can add some cutaways if there are some weird cuts in there. So I'm just gonna go with this thing at the moment. And everything looks good. I'm gonna go to my endpoint. And again, my endpoint is completely off. I will make an endpoint, and I use a 3-point editing again by using override. Let's take a look at this one.
Major.
What are you writing a book? Writing a book?
Oh, that didn't line up. So let's take a look.
What are you writing a book? Writing a book?
Now, in this case, I hear the book twice.
What are you writing a book? Writing a book? Writing a book? Writing a book?
Well, this can be fixed with the ripple. I mentioned I shouldn't use a ripple, but the good news about the ripple is this is a single clip, and if I use a ripple, I should be able to fix the double talk part. So I press on the shortcut B to get the ripple tool, and I'm going to ripple it only by that much. There. Let's take a look. Everything else is good, by the way. It's just being pulled forward.
What are you writing a book?
No.
The continuity is correct, but maybe the action is not right.
You're writing a book?
No.
Because if I look at the two cuts here, actually is not that bad, is it? Here, he's grabbing and pulling it, and here, this is open, this is closed. I hope nobody will notice that.
What are you writing a book?
I can fix that later with the rule. We'll talk about this. I'm gonna go forward to the next one.
Oh, aren't you the lucky one?
Okay, now this part is easier one. It says, "Are you the lucky one?" Let me make sure I have my snap on.
Oh, aren't you the lucky one?
I'm gonna go with this part.
Project.
Aren't you the lucky one?
Here we go.
Aren't you the lucky one?
It's actually not bad. I'm gonna try to line up the clips one more time. I listen to the word when he says, "Are you the lucky one?"
Oh, aren't you the lucky one?
At the end of the one. So let me go find out where he said it here. Sometimes it's easier to get the audio line up. You kind of know that the actors will act the same way.
And Madison College's new hockey super jack.
Aren't you the lucky one?
There we go. So if I find a lucky one, and here I have a lucky one. If I make this thing off sync and I go find the same thing,
The lucky one.
I should be able to resync him again.
Aren't you the lucky one?
That's good. That's very good. So
you the lucky one?
The thing is, lucky one, I actually like this camera angle. But in this case,
No, actually, I went to school.
he grabs the book or comic books and just place it there. And she said, no, I want to line up the no as well, because that's a little bit of a annoying part. So here's the thing I can do. I can use a tool called a roll, and I can grab this one and I push the cut forward. As you notice that the, let me make sure this is a larger one, like this. When I use a roll forward, I can see two clips at the same time. So if I go forward by the roll, the video, the final will look like this.
Are you very info?
No, actually, I went to school paper.
But as you notice that I might run into an issue with she's double talking. So I have to stay within the gap I have here. Of course, with the roll, I can push it back a little bit, try to get the guy's hand on the comic book. Kind of the best I can line them up the best I can like this. Is it still? Yeah, I think that's the limit because he's just slapping it. Yeah, I have this. This is my limit. I think the original cut was what I can do at the moment.
Are you very info?
No.
That's not bad. That's actually not bad. From where I'm standing is good for a rough cut.
Are you very info?
No, actually, I went to school paper and I'm doing a story on Madison College's new hockey super.
Oh, and are you?
So,
And I'm doing a story on Madison College's new hockey.
just gonna roll this thing back a little bit. By the way, my audio and video has to be selected together when I roll it. So when I listen to it.
No, actually, I went to school paper and I'm doing a story on Madison College's new hockey super jack.
Of course, I need that word when she's saying it. So I'll bring the roll, backwards to here. And now let's take a look.
No, actually, I went to school story on Madison College's new hockey super jack.
Actually, it's very good. Very good. I'm really pleased with it because I picked the right spot on audio when she said a word.
Actually, I went to school story on Madison College.
On the word story. And funny is these are two different clips. Well, you don't see her lips here. That is the good thing. You don't see her face. So if you're a little bit off, it's not a big deal. But the next one is good.
Actually,
very good.
I went to school story on Madison College's new hockey super jack.
Oh, and are you the lucky one?
Now, I want to, when it says, are you the lucky one, I want to change the camera angle on that. Let me double check this. I'm going to make a marker on these clips. I'm going to zoom out, making sure these two are linked first of all. And I'm going to make a marker on this part right here.
Oh, are you the lucky one?
Are you the lucky one? Let's just say I'm at right in the beginning of it. I select the clip and I press M twice to make a marker panel appear. I'll make a red marker for it. It should appear right on the timeline, just like this. There. So I have a decent marker. Now let's take a look at the other clip. The best thing is, again, I'm going to look at the audio.
Are you the lucky one?
There we go. Right, almost the same spot. I press M twice. I don't like to, the default marker is always green. Be honest with you, green on green is not exactly a good idea. I don't know why Adobe Premiere developers, they don't follow the Adobe Audition. In Audition, you can change the marker and make it to whatever color and stays the same color. For example, if I use a red one, it stays the red for the next one, or I use something close to it, like an orange or yellow, it stays on. In Premiere, always goes to the same green. And everything in Premiere is either green or this shade of a lavender blue, make it really difficult to see. I hope Adobe will taking care of that eventually. because it's one of those things that I constantly ask them to do, but they keep ignoring me. So let's look at the marker. See it? They're off, isn't it? That means if I use this thing and I make an in and out point for this part, my marker is off. So I will off sync it. I move the playhead to the marker. Then I sync him again. You got to constantly do that. Remember, actors, especially when you have a 1 minute and 30 seconds take that the conversation goes on and on, back and forth, actors and actresses and the directors, they might do their best to keep everything synchronized. But at the end of the day, they are humans, and they watch the original from a different camera angle. They can kind of rehearse it multiple times, but still they're not going to be able to perform it exactly the same way. So for me, on the timeline, I press I on the marker, I go forward.
Oh, you're the lucky one.
This is another tricky one, because when it says lucky one, Carrie also make a special facial impression with her face. Look.
Oh, you're the lucky one.
I'm not sure if I want that or not. At the moment, I try to make a basic rough cut. Maybe later I will add that part in there.
You're the lucky one.
I might just go, yeah, unfortunately, you said it right in the middle of a word. I will use the rolling to roll it back the best I can. So I make an out point. Remember, I got to go to in point of my timeline using a shift I. Then I need to make a new marker or in point in there. The markers should line up if I click on overwrite. Let's take a look.
Oh, you're the lucky one.
Again, looks pretty good.
Oh, you're the lucky one.
Now, as far as her face or facial impression goes, I will roll this thing back in a few minutes. I have 10 more minutes to cover as much as I can, and then I'm going to come back to it, and I use the trim mode to show you how powerful the trim mode is when it comes to refining it to the next part.
So,
That's actually not bad.
hey, tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
So let's say,
Oh, this isn't gonna be one.
let's see this one. That's actually not bad. I think they're very much lined up. So I'm gonna go here.
Where were you born?
Again, I gotta watch out his head. Funny is, on the program, he's looking at her, and here his face is down.
Where were you born?
The only choice I have is from this angle. I just make sure Carrie also looking at him in a wrong way. So this is a bad idea because his head is down, his head is up. So I've got to go back, sync him like this. That's the only frame I had at the moment.
Oh, this isn't gonna be one of those who's born in a log cabin and walked to school 6 miles uphill both ways. That fixes it.
I definitely want this part when she said I got to start from somewhere.
I have to start somewhere.
So I know this is gonna stay within that camera. So the part that I need to replace is this thing. I again use a shift I. On the source, I press I and overwrite. Let's take a look.
Yourself, where were you born?
I heard something.
Where were you born?
I heard burn twice. Not a problem. I use again the tool called ripple. I can just ripple this part. If I'm a little bit short, that's all right. I'll look at their head. His head is all correct, and she should be all right because we don't see her face from that angle. Let's take a look.
Tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
She
moves where were you born?
She moves a little bit.
Where were you born?
Right there. I don't like that part. So again, unfortunately, the continuity is slightly been affected by it, but I have no choice.
Where were you born?
I don't still like it. Let's take a look at this one. I'm going to use a play around.
Blake, tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
Better. Let me watch it again.
Blake, tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
This time I'm going to look at Blake. Carrie looks good. And I'm going to look at the Blake, his hands.
Where were you born?
So, yeah, that's going to be a problem.
Where were you born?
So, as you can see, my clip is getting shorter and shorter on the cut. I guess that's the frame I have. I have, again, no choice to ripple it. Come on, ripple properly. Let's take a look at this one again. I'm going to play around.
Blake, tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
There we go. It's very smooth. If I play frame by frame,
Where were you born?
looks good. Looks very good.
Blake, tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
This isn't going to be going how he was born.
Blake.
Okay. I'm going to go forward to the next one. I got 7 minutes to finish this part before I jump to the trim mode.
This isn't going to be going how he was born in log cabin. Walked to school 6 miles uphill.
Okay. 6 miles. What is it?
6 miles uphill.
I have to start somewhere. I'm sorry.
He said something about 6 miles, but
He was born in log cabin. Walked to school 6 miles up.
I don't hear it, so maybe I need to unripple it here to see what they said.
Uphill both ways. This is it.
I have to have somewhere to start. I'm sorry.
That cut is not very good, so yes, it's right here. I'll give him a little bit of distance and start from here. That's good.
I have to start somewhere. I'm sorry.
That's good. That's very good. Now,
so great stuff.
now when it says important part, let me take a look at this scene. Again, I'm making a marker here, writing the important part, because I need to keep an eye on what is happening here and there. Is the same thing he said?
Why don't we skip the trivia and get right to the important part?
Uh-oh, they're completely off.
So great stuff.
Because he said it here.
Get the trivia and get right to the important part. It'd be so great stuff.
So I'm gonna listen to the great stuff.
Uphill both ways. This is it.
I have to have somewhere to start. I'm sorry.
Why don't we just skip the trivia and get right to the important part? It'd be so great stuff.
There we go. That's the part I want. So I'm gonna look at the audio.
Get right to the important part. It'd be so great stuff.
I'm gonna make a marker here. A yellow marker. And if I, again, look at my 2 markers, they don't line up. So I need to off-sync it, jump to the next marker, use a shortcut Shift-M. Then I can select the gang source and program. Now I'm good again. That's perfect. All I need to do on a timeline is create the endpoint.
So great stuff.
Okay.
Well, definitely I want carry after that. So I'll press in O, then I use a Shift I, select the source and press I, and then click on override. Now I'm good to go. Let's take a look.
I have to start somewhere. I'm sorry.
Let's just skip the trivia and get right to the important part. You get to be so great stuff.
There we go. I know the audio levels are a little bit off. We haven't even get to the audio yet, but audio has to be balanced. But
be so great stuff.
Okay. So,
she said okay twice, I heard.
Great.
Okay.
Well, of course, I don't want the okay from here, so I can just use ripple it simply. This okay, I don't need it.
Be so great stuff.
Okay. Where were you born?
I'm going to stop here. And as you can see, there's a couple of other ones about your love life and stuff like that. Those are a little bit trickier to do. And now you know why in my class I give the students a rough cut already, so they don't need to go through this this process. This will take probably another hour for me to finish the rest of it, and then I have a good rough cut. Let's take a look from the beginning what I have so far as a final project between a cut. So I know you guys will not be able to see the visual or the smooth video playback, but the audio should give you a good idea about the continuity, and the conversation is actually kind of nice. And you can take my word for it, of course.
Hi, Blake Truman.
It's to know.
I'm Carrie Wells. Hope you don't mind if I sit down for a minute. I see you're a classic lit major.
What are you writing in the book?
No, actually, I'm with the school story on Madison College's new hockey super jock.
Why are you the lucky one?
So, Blake, tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
This isn't going to be one of those who was born in a log cabin and walked to school 6 miles uphill both ways. This is it.
I'll have to start somewhere. I'm sorry.
Let's just skip the trip and get right to the important part. You get to be so great stuff.
Okay. Where were you born?
In order for this to be a really good story, there needs to be some serious empathy between the writer and the subject. I'll show you. Wasn't it?
All right. So this is what I have. Let's take a look at the trim. Now the trim tool helped me to really adjust the edge. I don't really need to have the sync anymore because I'm done with the source panel. I need what I have. However, having the sync on might kind of backfire, because as you remember, I had to resync it multiple times because, of course, these are not perfect. It's not a multi-camera. It's not a live event with a multiple camera. So even I keep the sync on, it actually become confusing, because at the very beginning, I might have it sync there, but later on I have to resync it 3-4 times. So they're not going to line up that easily. So I don't bother with the sync anymore. So I'm gonna remove the gang, and it's time for me to go to the trim mode. So the trim mode works in a way, I make my audio much smaller because I'm passing the point. I need to see it, but it doesn't have to be that big. And also I make my video track is a little bit larger by pulling it upward a little bit. I make the necessary adjustments to my interface, and all I need to do, hit the home key and then hit the down arrow to go to the first cut. Once I'm in the first cut, I'll zoom into the timeline and I double click on the cut. That's the cut. Now I know the first cut is actually, you know, you need actually audio and video to be synced perfectly. So I'm gonna start with this one. When I double click on the cut, technically it's a second cut. I'm going to use a play around, or actually I hit a space bar. In this case, you don't need to have a specific shortcut for it. I'm just gonna hit the space bar, look what happens.
Hi, Blake Truman.
It's to know.
If I turn my loop off, it stops.
It's to know.
Doesn't matter actually. The normal loop, you use a shortcut. With the play around, you must have a loop on. But when you're in a trim, the trim automatically loops it for you. So it doesn't matter if it's on or off, makes no difference whatsoever. I'm gonna play it one more time and looking at the cut.
Hi, Blake Truman.
Now the cut in here, be careful though. If I touch the timeline in any way, you're going outside of a trim mode. So I'm not in a trim anymore. I have to double click on it and do not touch the timeline. So whatever I'm going to do, I have to be inside the trim mode. But the moment I touch the playhead, remember the playhead of a program and a timeline are synced together and are linked. So if I touch the playhead, I'm going to lose it. So I'm going to play and look at the cut.
Hi, Blake.
You notice one thing is strange. I know it's very difficult for you to see it. She's walking on the left footage. She stops, but on the right side, she's still walking. Let me see if you guys can see it online. I know it's very, very difficult at the low frame rate to see it. Wait for it.
Hi,
Right there. I'm going to show you frame by frame. So look, she's stopped here. She's actually stopping. But the next one, she's walking. Look at the position of a chair. The cut should have been here, not here. Again, in the real world, I don't get out of the trim mode because in trim, I can actually see the problem when I play it.
Hi,
right there.
Blake Truman.
So if I want to fix it, I need to move this cut backwards. But if I move it with the trim, the black arrow, you know it creates a gap. We established that earlier in the morning. If I use a ripple, it's gonna pull everything, it's gonna destroy everything. So I need to place my tool right in the middle of the screen. That's called roll. If I pull this thing back to the right side, you guys can see the girl on the left side of the screen. Look here, she's stopped. I'm gonna exaggerate it, but roll it forward. Then if I play it frame by frame, you guys can see how awkward this one is.
Hi, Blake.
Right there. So she stops, but she's still moving forward. So to fix that, I grab a roll and I roll it back. Remember, I already synchronized them. The difference is I want the left side. She's not in there. So I have to be or must be on the roll. I roll it back. Now, if I play it, I agree with you that she's not as close as to the chair as on the left side. The left side, she's right there. But the thing is, I'm going to change the camera angle. So in reality, it takes maybe extra half a second for her to literally walk through the cafeteria. So yes, I expanded it. Let's take a look.
Hi, Blake.
There. So we see her more and Blake's less. If I do the other way around, again, because she stops, it's not going to look very good. So I'm going to go back a little bit. My limit is right here. 218 is my literally maximum frame I can have from that clip. I can reduce that to minimal or even completely remove it if I have to. But this is the one I'm going to go with.
Hi, Blake Truman.
Now, once I've done, I'm happy with it. I literally hit the down arrow on my keyboard and I'm moving to the next cut. Make sure your audio or video track is selected. If your destination track is not selected, then a down arrow not going to work. Now, usually my audio, after the trim, I will create a J cut and an L cut. And with that thing, you have to be very careful only selecting a video track or audio track because audio and video will not line up. You end up with the two different cuts for the same cut because down and up arrow is based on what track is selected. If they're off sync, then it becomes a bit confusing. I'm going to play this part now.
Hi, Blake Truman.
Who wants to know?
I'm Carrie Well.
Actually, I don't mind this thing That looks all right. Let me take a look at it
Hi,
again.
Blake Truman?
Wants to know.
That's all right. I'm gonna go to the next one and see if we can. Oh yeah, the one that she's sitting on the chair. Let's take a look at this one.
Blake Truman?
Wants to know.
I'm Carrie Wells.
Yes. So, I'm gonna watch this cut a couple of times. Usually, when I do the trim, you guys don't laugh. I do this thing, okay? Because I don't need to see the source effect controls or audio, so I make my program panel the largest one, and I usually get rid of the other panels. I don't need to see them, so I grab my timeline and I usually just place it here, and then I squeeze these two tools on the side. This is my trim mode, because again, I don't need to see anything else. I don't need to go and import stuff or looking at the markers. I'm past that point. So I'm just gonna, this is more like a Final Cut or old Final Cut or Galaxy or DaVinci Resolve screen when you look at it this way. So let's take a look.
Blake Truman?
Wants to know.
I'm Carrie Wells.
The way she's sitting on here, unfortunately, I've seen two cuts there, because the way she sits the next cut, since my playback set to 3 and 3, I see a little bit too much. As I told you, you guys need to change these numbers as you go. So I'm going to change this thing to 2 and 2. This should eliminate some of the extra going back and forth when I'm working with the trim mode. So let's take a look.
Wants to know.
I'm Carrie Wells.
Wants to know.
Now it's way shorter, just fine. I might even go and change the trim to 1 and 1. Because I want to really focus on the actual cut. This time when I play it, you only should see 1 second before, 1 second after it. So we can really focus on the actual cut itself.
I'm
To know.
I'm
To know.
Now, here's the thing I discovered by watching it multiple times. Look at her right hand is on the notebook, and in this scene, her hand is not on the notebook. Her hand goes on the notebook later. Watch the scene. She touches the notebook. The next one, she's just going for it. So, how I can fix this issue? The problem is, if I roll it to forward, like she's grabbing it right there, I'm not sure what's happening to the audio, because as I'm rolling the cut, the audio will be affected. So one of the tricks we can do is called the J cut. So I know my video and audios are unlinked. I'm just going to link them again to show you the problem. So this is a problem I'm dealing with. As I grab the cut and I move it forward, the audio also being messed up. If I play it, you might hear something awkward.
I'm Carrie Wells.
Here, you heard twice.
I'm Carrie Wells. I'm Carrie Wells.
The problem with this thing was I synchronized the clips with the audio and it clips, but now I start being very picky with the details of where her arm is. I know a lot of us being in a YouTube looking at the Hollywood blockbuster movies, and they said, I don't know, the Marvels, Captain Marvel or Captain America, 10 mistakes in a movie. And you know better that people making those movies, they make a lot of money. They are very talented. Those movies cost a couple of $100 million. and they have usually 6 to 8 to 10 months to edit the movie anyway, it's still, they might miss these things because it's a very difficult, long, tedious process. So it is normal for somebody to forget these things, or sometimes they don't have time to do it. I'm being very picky today, and I need to fix that. In order for me to fix it, I cannot roll it forward. I want it, but I cannot because the audio got messed up. So how about this? If I place the ripple and I move it forward, what's going to happen? The audio and video move together. So I'm going to deselect this screen, and if I just double click on the cut to go to the trim, I'm going to zoom into the timeline if I can, right there. Again, if I just grab this thing and move it forward, it moves the whole cut forward. But what I would do, let me go back to exactly where I was, right there. I zoomed in too much on a timeline. So I apologize for this. Here, I just want to make sure everybody can see the problem. I'll move it forward when she touches the book right there. You end up with the extra audio. This is the problem. But if I be able to turn off the audio and only trim the video, I'll be happy. So in this case, I deselect the screen, and in Premiere there's an option here called linked selection. You can also use a shortcut like an Option key or Alt key to do that. I'm just going to turn this thing off. Now when I double click on the video portion, you realize I can actually roll the video only. Just by a couple of frames. Just like that. If I play it, you will see this audio and video, they don't line up anymore. This is called the J-cut. I know in J-cut, in a traditional way, the J-cut is more of a, like this. The audio comes forward, then becomes a video, because the shape looks like a J. In an L-cut, the audio of a clip goes forward, but the video cuts short. So the video stops like this, that's the video, but the audio portion will go forward. Therefore, it creates a shape like an L shape here, known as an L cut. Of course, the next video will be there. So that's another video. Funny is, next video that goes forward, this video has an L cut, but the next clip in here doesn't have a J. So J and L, despite they look like this, they don't kind of follow each other. In the J cut, like what we have, the video goes forward and audio stops right here. So that's the cut right there. This helps us a lot because sometimes, again, in this case, she talks and I want to keep the audio correct, but the action is not lining up. So if I play it, it looks actually pretty good. Let's take a look. So the way she's holding the notebook is correct. She's going for it. She grabs it, and the next cut, she holds it. Again, I will double click on the edge. I'm in the trim mode. Now remember, audio is correct in this case. The continuity of audio was correct. We established that. So if I leave my link on, every time I'm going to do a roll, I'm going to damage it. I have to go through the dance again. So I'm going to leave this thing alone. That's the reason I actually click on link selection rather than using a shortcut Alt or Option, because in Alt and Option, you can exactly do the same thing. The problem is you got to constantly hold in a shortcut. If you make a mistake and forget it, then not going to work. I'm hitting a down arrow to go to the next cut. Again, you guys can see the audio and video are selected together. That's how the cut usually goes if you use a shortcut. I'm going to play it from here.
I'm very well. Nope. I'm very well. Nope.
Now, this part about sitting, if I'm looking at it from two different angles, I gotta admit, actually looks pretty good. I mean, look at the way she's leaning to the side. I'm actually impressed myself how good this one looked like. But I have to just double click on a cut. Let's see what else I can do. Again, I'm not going to touch the audio. The audio is good. I'm going to see how far I can push this thing. Now, if I move it to the left, I can change when she's sitting from this angle. Let's take a look at it. By rolling it back. This is called a back editing.
I'm very well. I'm very well.
Or I can use this camera on the left side when she's completely sitting.
Very well.
Let's take a look at this one.
Very well. Nope.
Maybe I can even push it forward. It's still. Let's take a look.
Well. 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 Well.
As you can see, I have to watch this thing over and over and over to make proper judgment. I'm going again to my preferences, video playback, to change these numbers. I told Adobe a few times through the forums and the direct connection that there's something in Premiere really bugs me. For example, pre-roll and post-roll. Don't you think when you're in a trim mode would be a nice idea to put these numbers down here so I could just easily adjust the numbers when I want to see longer or shorter rather than keep going to the preferences? It could be a very nice thing. Like Adobe could just put a drop-down menu here, like like the way they've done it with the resolution and the options or the fit and stuff like that. They could have just easily done that, but no, I have to go to preferences every time I want to adjust in and out point for pre-roll and post-roll. That becomes a bit frustrating as you work with it. So let's take a look.
I'm very well.
It feels like she's taking much longer to sit down the way the cut is.
I'm very well.
Because I see she's sitting and then she feels like it takes him forever. So I would go with somewhere in the middle. In the middle usually is a good cut because it's a fast action. This one, she sits quicker on a chair.
I'm very well.
There. Maybe a little bit. I'll push her this way.
I'm very well.
Wow, this time I have an L cut. As you can see, wow, this is a kind of funny one. The beginning is a J cut, at the end of it is an L cut. Here you go, J and L. How about that? I rarely have two of them at the same time on the same clip, but you never know. I'm going to the next cut. This one. So let's take a look. Now this is another tricky one. I want you guys to pay attention to what Carrie is doing. Especially her hands. I need to get out of trim mode to show you what I mean. Again, you guys have a hard time to see it online. I'm going to play it frame by frame. So, where is her right hand. She's still looking in her purse. And the next scene, her hand is right there. This needs to be fixed. The good news is I have a lot of spot here that nobody's talking. From here, that little thing, there's a noise there. I don't know where that noise is coming from. That noise. So literally from this point to this point, that she starts touching the paper, I'm okay. I have a lot of flexibility. So this should be a walk in the park for me. I'm going to double click again on it. And let's take a look what I can do with this. How's that? If I play it. Excellent. It looks very good. Let me double check it for you. If I go back, look at her right arm. Here we go. Right arm, right arm. The guy Blake looks good. He's holding a pen. He's holding a pen. Despite the angle of a pen is a little bit off, and we're not going to be that picky. Oh, there's no choice. I mean, I have limited things to work with, and I don't have much of a cutaway with these clips. By the way, this might be off topic, and it is, but since we are on this clip, I just gonna mention a few things. Have you guys heard anybody else in the cafeteria but these two? I mean, you've seen the first clip, right? This one. Let's just start from the very beginning of it. Let's take a look at this part and listen to it. So what happened to this girl? What happened to the people in the back? What happened to those three girls are talking? Okay.
Hi.
In a movie set, they want to capture the actor and actress's voice perfectly. So the extras in the back, or the other actors, they're usually extras, but they are also actor or actresses. They talk about something first, and then they pretend they're talking, but they don't. It's because they can add a rumble sound effects later to it. So it's kind of funny when you're watching and do the editing like that. You see that person in the back constantly talking, and you don't hear anything. Just as I said, it's off topic, but just want to mention that for some of you who are curious. I'm going to go to the next cut. Let's take a look at this one.
What are you writing for?
No.
This is a tricky one. I spend a lot of time with few of my students try to figure it out how we can do this scene with the comic books. Trust me, this is a very tricky one. And what I have here is literally the bare minimum, and there's no way I can fix it more than that, because if I roll this thing back a little bit, I can actually do this part if you prefer. Actually, this might work too. Right here. The comic books is open. He's grabbing it from here. So let's take a look at this part.
What are you writing for?
No.
Well, that's actually not bad. Not bad at all. I don't think I've ever done that before. Right in the middle of grabbing it from both sides.
What are you writing for?
No.
I like this one.
What are you writing for?
I like the cut when he said book, right on the word book. So I gotta stay within where I am right there. This is not very good.
Let me check. What are you writing, fuck?
Works too. But I like the this part. Again, this is too late. This is a one that I can start from here. That's a good starting point. Maybe even a little bit more back. This is good. This is very good.
Let me check. What are you writing, fuck?
The reason I like this one, because if you look at the audio here, that's the part when you said what do you write in a book, right here. That's the word book. And my cut is right before it. So the moment he said book, I'm changing a camera angle on him. That is actually not bad.
What are you writing, fuck?
I really personally want to see the original movie to see what the actual editor did for this scene in the cafeteria versus what I'm doing right now. Again, I've never seen a movie, so it's not something like, I've seen a Star Wars hundreds of times, and then when I'm doing the editing of a Star Wars, subconsciously I am following the editors of a Star Wars or George Lucas's style of the filmmaking. A lot of people do that, unfortunately, because it's not what they want to do. They don't want to copy somebody else's work, but they get inspired by it, obviously. But kind of thing like subconsciously, they will do the editing the same way. Now, it's not a plagiarism, or somebody might call it. It's not. It's just you're inspired by it, and subconsciously you're following it. In this case, I've never seen this movie before. So whatever I'm doing here is literally my editing, which is kind of interesting. But I won't mind to look at the original one, see how exactly they've done that versus what I'm doing right now.
What are you writing, fuck?
No.
That's not bad. Now let's go to the next one. When she said no, this one.
No, actually, I'm with the school story on Madison College's new hockey season. No, actually, I'm with.
Boy, this is a tricky one. Let's take a look. Why is this one a tricky one?
No, actually.
I can change the camera angle on the word no. So I will roll this thing back. The moment he slaps it on a table, let's take a look at this one.
What are you writing, fuck?
No, actually, I'm with the school story on.
The lips are not syncing, is it?
What are you writing, fuck?
No, actually, I'm with the school story.
Yep, the lips is not syncing. So I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm gonna sync them together, audio and video, and I'm going to create a marker here on the timeline, right here. Why I need to make a marker? Because I don't want to lose the point. I don't want to repeat this thing twice. I want to put a red marker that when I roll it back to see what it looked like, if I don't like it, I don't need to undo it. And later on in the trim, I can always go back again. So I'm going to press N on the keyboard to get my rolling tool. I'm going to roll it manually. This is rolling the audio and video. So let me play around.
You're writing, fuck?
With the school paper and I'm doing the story.
That's what happened when I, yes, that's right. When I move the audio and video together. Let's take a look again.
With the school paper and I'm doing the story on Madison.
I'm gonna go back and play it out.
With the school paper and I'm doing the story.
Yeah, that's not gonna work because he's still holding it. So this gotta go forward, and I have no choice here. The only choice I have.
No, actually, I'm with the school story on Madison College's new.
When she said no.
No, actually.
If I grab the video and pull the video only by holding the Alt key and put it right on the no. I don't think lips are syncing.
No, actually, I'm with the
Yep, lips are not syncing. So I basically hit the wall here. There's nothing I can do. That's what I like, that angle when she said no.
No, actually, I'm with the school story on Madison College's new hockey super chat.
Question is how far I can pull this thing back. I need to try something. I'll show you the trick. I need my default screen settings. So I'll go to my Canvas startup. You know what? I'm going to actually create a work area for this thing. I'm going to create a new called My Trim. So I'm not going to lose this interface. Then I'm going to select my startup right here, and I select F12. Pressing F12 will resets it. There we go. Let's take a look. What do I miss here? I'm going to go to my marker on the timeline. Now you know why I made a marker, Shift M. So that's the trickiest spot that I need to address the issue. I am on this clip, right? So I will go one frame backwards to show you the other angle. Then I press F on the keyboard. F, called match frame, will load the same clip inside my source panel. You guys can see the in and out point, everything there. Now I'm going to sync them. So when I move forward one frame, they're synced.
Paper, and I'm doing a story on Madison.
So once I get the sync point here, I'm gonna go to the part when she said
No, actually, I'm with the
no. Actually, I need to find out where that camera angle, this one is. This one. At this angle, because audio coming from here. So I can actually do the repeat the same thing by going here, pressing F to load that clip, original clip, because they are the same. So let me go back to my marker. I press select this clip, press F. Oh, why keep? Oh, you know what? Sorry, this should not be on when you are trying to match frame it. Sorry, that's why. That's what the problem is. So here, I match frame it. Now these two frames are matched. If I sync them, they're together. Okay? You can see by the person walking behind the screen. Now the good news is this. Remember there was a problem? She says no right here. This part on a timeline, she says no.
No, actually, I'm with the
I want to find out where exactly in here the no is. And it's not even close to it.
I'm with the school paper, and I'm doing a story on Madison.
It's way before that. Way before that.
No.
That's the problem I have.
No.
Yeah, it's right here. Unfortunately, if I go with this cut, I'm going to lose my L cut. That beautiful L cut that I worked so hard to get when he's reaching for the book. Right there. The problem in here is when she says no, no, actually, he already put the comic books on the table. The scene that I like to see, she says no, he's still holding the comic books.
No.
Right there. So I have a two choice. Go with the comic books or, well, get the no. Let's just say I don't know which one. I don't know which one looks the best. Show you guys some little trick there. I will select the rough cut one and I duplicate it. Right click, select duplicate. So I'm not going to touch this one because this is already a good one. right? This part is already good right there.
No, actually, I'm with the school story on Madison College's new hockey super shot.
I'm just not sure about this thing. Maybe director comes and says, you know, I don't care about the way he grabs the comic books, but I want to see what she does with the no. And I'm not going to destroy everything I have because somebody just have a hunch or somebody want to see a different version of it. So I make a duplicate and I double click on a duplicate. I will call this thing, yeah, RC1 copy 1 is fine. Let's take a look what I can do with this one.
What are you writing?
No.
On the word no, I will redo it. I will use a roll. I hold the Alt key and I synchronize them again. Then I pull it back and I play it from the other angle.
What are you writing about?
Sorry, I need to go the other way.
What are you writing about?
No.
I need to keep going more forward.
What are you writing about?
No, actually, I'm with.
There we go.
Oh, actually,
I need to pull it back. And probably hear a no twice.
No, actually, I'm with the school story.
Yep, now that's the problem. I have two no's.
No.
So I would go and do something really weird. I need to ripple it, unfortunately. I have no choice. Now I have corrected it. Let's take a look.
No, actually, I'm with the school.
There we go.
No, actually, I'm with.
Now I'm running to an issue of the no looks pretty good, but he's putting the comics down. That's not a problem. I will go back to my trim mode and you see what I can do with this now. So let me change my interface to trim mode and explore this particular version of it. Some of you might like one versus the other one. Unfortunately, this is not an auditioning. Auditioning requires, I might be able to put it on top of the other one, but I'd rather to make a different timeline if I have to, because this will change a lot. I had to ripple it, right?
No.
So let's take a look.
You're writing book.
No, actually, I'm with the school story on Madison.
You're writing book.
No, actually, I'm with the school story.
So the continuity of the girl is good, but I need to turn the link off and you see what I can do with the book. Ooh, that's a tricky one, isn't it? He's already putting it down and he's still holding it. Maybe in some way, nobody will notice that he closed the comic books and here the comic books is still half open. See what I mean? Something like this. Maybe people will forgive me for it. Let me see how to look like.
What are you writing book?
No, actually, I'm with.
How's that? Let's take a look again.
What are you writing book?
No, actually, I'm with.
But now I missed the no part, which is kind of funny, isn't it? The whole point of this one was getting the no lined up, doesn't it?
No, actually, I'm with the.
Then I have only one choice. This has to go forward. Yep.
Actually, I'm with the.
And if I go forward, I'm reaching a limit.
No, actually, I'm with the school story on that.
Yep. This has become very, very tricky because I have to roll this thing forward like this. Try to get this one pushed forward.
No, actually, I'm with the school story on Madison.
And now his head is messed up. As you can see, this was a bad idea. No matter what I do, I would not be able to line up the way she said no and the way he's handling the comic books. Simple is, as I mentioned, the way she's acting and she's grabbing it and she's saying it is different. There's a second or 1.5 second duration discrepancy between the way she said no in a one way and the other way. This is not going to work, so I'm just going to close this. This is how you test it. Otherwise, you saw what happened to my timeline. I literally destroyed it because I had to rebuild it. We have to take it apart and rebuild it again, see if there's a way I can do this again. I like this one.
What are you writing in book?
No, actually, I'm with the school story on Madison College's new hockey. No, actually, I'm with the school story on Madison College.
Best thing I can do, the best thing I can do is try to pull this thing backwards a little bit with the roll. But unfortunately, because she's talking, the lip's not going to sync.
No, actually, I'm with the school story.
Lips is not going to sync. So it's lips synced up in here.
School story on Madison College's new hockey super chat.
Well, you're the lucky one.
There's a limit. So let's take a look at this one then.
Well, you're the lucky one.
I'm going to go to the trim mode. And
well, you're the lucky one.
I'm going to double click on the cut. And take a look at this part.
College's new hockey super chat.
Well, you're the lucky one.
Now, this is an easy one, relatively, because, again, there's no audio here. I should be able to push this thing back. Maybe I should bring this thing a little bit lower. Let me try it again. Bring this thing lower, make it more visual. And I can roll this thing back a little bit because you see the way she's leaning. Maybe I like this thing that she's. I gotta watch for her lips because look in the audio track here may be a bit of an issue with the lip sync. I'm gonna play it to see the issue.
The school story on Madison College's new hockey super chat.
Well, you.
The school story on Madison College's new hockey super chat.
Well,
Yeah, I don't like that. I'm gonna move it forward. I'm gonna go with this one instead.
Hockey super chat.
well, you're the lucky one.
This is actually not a bad cut because the original cut was just a simple one, right on a marker. This one. I don't like these sorts of cuts personally because it feels like a rough cut.
College's new hockey super chat.
Well, you're the lucky
See what I mean? The moment camera goes on someone, the person starts talking.
well, you're the lucky one.
Between us, I watch a lot of Turner Classic movies. The TMN, Turner Classic, TSN or TMN, one of those things. The Turner Classic, sorry, there's a TLC or that's a learning channel, but it doesn't matter. One of those channels, the Turner Classic, plays a lot of older movies, and a lot of them are classic. A lot of them. And sometimes they just get stuck in a, whatever actor or actress is a tribute to that person because, she or he passed away recently and they have, or is an anniversary. They just run, marathon of some movies. But I've seen a lot of movies from 1930s and even movies like Gone with the Wind or Wizard of Oz. Editing those things were very difficult. They didn't have the technique, they didn't have the equipment to cut the film because audio and the film has to be perfectly synced. They used to use a separated studio to record audio. If you guys watching a movie singing in the rain or under the rain, I think it was a Singing in the Rain. That was a comedy part about the placement of a microphone. And then the audio department was a different building to record the audio because cameras were noisy and they had to record it differently. So they couldn't easily create an L cut or a J cut. One, they didn't know that back then. It's an art, so it's evolved. Second part is they didn't have the expertise and equipment because it would become off sync. They didn't know how to synchronize it after all. Maybe somebody else later on learned how to create some sort of markers or something or a crayon that they could mark the magnetic tape so they could have find the spots without damaging the tape itself. I'm not sure. I haven't seen equipments from 1930s in real life or never worked with them to be able to tell you that. But definitely they had restrictions. Either was the knowledge or there was the equipment. So in this case, this looks like a cut from 1930s and 40s. Well, 40s is exception. A lot of good movies were in 1940s. But this, consider a rough cut. Despite you might say is a very, very good cut. See?
Wow, you're the lucky one.
If I shift this thing forward a little bit or pull it a little bit, so give him a little bit of more screen time or less screen time. Basically, I'm turning into a J or an L cut. The result is much, much better. Let's take a look. Again, unfortunately, because you guys watching the streaming, you're not seeing it at 24 frames per second, it's not as smooth as I hope to be. This, I can pull it back. How far? I just gotta make sure she is not saying any word here because the lips are not gonna sync here. So I'm gonna go. Actually, her head looks kind of nice though. It just lines up. So I'm gonna go back a little bit. When she says super jock, I definitely want to see her impression right there. So going back is not a good idea because I lose every bit of acting that she did. See? That's not a good one. We all agree. So I'm going to go forward. I'm looking at this panel though, the left one. Remember, left one is an outgoing and the right one is an incoming. So that's the last frame of this clip. The right side is the first frame of this clip. So I'm going to move it forward. I want to see her right there. I got lucky because he's kind of angled. You might see his lips a little bit off, but I'm going to go forward, take my chances. And I'm going to go kind of exaggerated version of it. If I play it, I crossing my finger that his lips from the outgoing clip lines up. So I'm going to play it.
Wow, you're the lucky one.
Actually looks pretty good.
Wow, you're the lucky one.
As you notice that the camera changed on him when he said lucky one.
Wow, you're the lucky one.
Or I can pull it back a little bit. The problem with this thing is he's writing something, right? So let's see.
Wow, you're the lucky one.
I'm looking at his hand now, not his face or his head. Those are good.
Wow, you're the lucky one.
I'm gonna go forward a little bit. A little bit more. I think this is my final one.
Wow, you're the lucky one.
There you go.
Wow, you're the lucky one.
I know it's very annoying, right? Watching the same clip over and over and over. So if you're doing anything like that, make sure you have a headphone, or if you use a speaker like I'm doing right now. There's nobody around. I'm in my office, so I can play this video all day long, even loud, and nobody's around. My wife, she's working her own office a couple of doors away, so she won't really hear me. Well, her office means her kind of like a loft or living room turned to the office at the moment. But I'm in my own real video studio, so when I'm editing it,
Wow, you're the lucky one.
it's fine. I'm not bugging anybody. And the next cut, I'm just gonna go to the next cut.
Wow, you're the lucky one.
So
I kind of like this one. I don't have to do anything to it.
Wow, you're the lucky one.
Because the key point in here is she thinks she's getting somewhere with this guy's story and try to get the information as much as she can. And then I like the way she's grabbing her right hand from under her chin. She just drops it, and the angle looks good. Everything looks good. And the delay is good. If I shift this thing forward, I don't have much because that clip was too short already anyway. Look how short this clip is. So I don't have much of a choice. I can go forward. If I do that, it's going to damage that part, this part. Unless you want to change the camera angle that she's already moving her arm a little bit, you make it faster cut, like this. As you notice that she moves her arm quicker. But I want she move her arm a lot slower. Looks like she's more interested on this story. Like this.
So
that looks better to me. The reason you guys see a cut here and there because this clip is too short, and when I do a play around, it goes back from this cut. So if I play it as a one shot, it should look much more cleaner.
Story on Madison College's new hockey super shot. So, Blake.
There you go.
Blake, tell me about yourself. Where were you born?
I'm gonna stop here because the rest of the cuts are literally the same thing, and I'm almost ran out of time. I got a couple of more minutes left to talk about a few things. For example, a slip or a slide, and why did I use those things? So let me put my save my project first of all. I don't want to lose anything. And by the way, when you're doing this trim business or you're doing any kind of other project, when you go to workspace, if you need to continue working with the trim mode and you forgot to make a workspace, you can still use this option called import workspace from project. That means if I open this project, my workspace trim mode will be automatically loaded because that's the last thing I've done. If I enable this option and I open the project from yesterday color correction I did, Premiere will change my interface to the color correction automatically because he imports a workspace from that project. Otherwise, I have to go and select, for example, my color correction settings from yesterday. These panel you see on the top here wasn't really part of a Premiere. Premiere, I believe in CC and CS6, they added in there. Before that, you had to go to the window workspace and select it, and the shortcuts are not really customizable. So when I go to the keyboard shortcuts, right there, and if I go to application, panels, and I go to the window right here, if I expand the window workspace, what do you see? I have none of those workspaces that I made. There's no reference to them. So I cannot just create a shortcut called F5 to press on that and change it to color mode. So Adobe add that thing inside the old Premiere because it's actually very useful, especially if you work for, let's say you're an editor, you're somebody that's worked with multiple projects from different people, and then some projects has to be put on the back burner because you need to do something else, and then back and forth. This helps you to open and adjust your project workspace immediately. So I'm going to put it back to the default this couple of minutes I have. Let's talk about the slip and a slide. In the world of slip and a slide, I just need to go somewhere at the end of a timeline. And I most likely need just a piece of clip. So I'm going to grab this thing, put it right there. I don't need an audio to make things a bit more easier. And I most likely need more. So I'm going to load another thing. Let's say this clip right there. And I'm just going to go somewhere else and make a completely new in and out point, something like that. Make sure everything is off sync because I don't want to touch anything. So let's just say I have 3 clips here on a timeline. In reality, I have 1 clip here and 1 clip here and then 3rd one in the bottom. Some of you probably wondering why I didn't or I don't make things look like this, like a staircase, because that's easier to understand what clip goes to whatever. Well, the problem with this thing is you only have 1 choice of editing. The trim tool, not the trim mode, the trim tool. If I double click on it, this just won't function very well because as you can see, you just pull and pushing it. It doesn't interact with the other clip. So may as well just grab this thing and pull it forward and push it forward. The thing is, I don't care about the first clip or the 3rd clip. I care about the middle clip. The middle clip, if I have a wrong settings, I need to move it forward and backwards. And you can see the middle clip through the gap in between in here. This gap is there. Let me select the drawing tool. This is a gap I have. This part of a video is not visible, and this part of the video is not visible neither, because the other clips are covering it. So in a way, I can move the clip forward and backwards underneath. This is known as a slip. Now the problem with the slip is you are moving clips forward and backwards. It creates an off sync. So in reality, this clip is on top of the other one just like that. So when I select a slip tool, with the slip tool, you can see 4 frames at the same time. This way, I can line up multiple frames at the same time. But the problem with the slip is, a slip cannot be used after roll. Why? Well, remember the tools I wrote? Trim. Remember, this is a trim tool, not the trim mode. Ripple, slip, slide, roll. So if these are the tools that usually we apply them in the order, well, of course, if I apply the roll already to sync them, the slip will basically destroys it. Remember, a slip and a slide and the ripple job is a one thing. Keeping the clips in sync and the continuity correct. Ripple just tight things up a little bit. And then with the slip and the slide, you adjust the synchronization. Once they're synced with the roll, you can move it back and forth. I already done that using a tool here called Gang Source and Program and the markers. So already I've done a slip and a slide virtually. So that's why I skipped them completely. If I use a slip and a slide, it's gonna make everything off sync. And here it is. Let me just grab one of these clips that I worked so hard, or this one. Select the tool slip. Do you see the numbers? The numbers called off sync. Now I can select a slide and do the same thing, and you got the numbers too. That means the lips are not lining up. But the roll, I can do this thing all day long and nothing is off sync. The only thing I have to worry about was they're picking up the papers and notebooks and her hand angle, and because sometimes the audio comes from a different clip. For example, this clip, the audio comes from the other clip, like L cut and J cut. I have to worry about those, so the lips are kind of lines up. But doesn't matter, I can just roll it back. A slip, once you slipped it, you destroyed it. And a slide, you're wondering, is exactly the same thing in the opposite way. A slide, when the clip is on top, like this. So you have a slided like this way. A slide, the clip in the middle doesn't change the duration. What it does, it reduces the visibility of the first clip, or increase the visibility or duration of a first clip and reduce the second clip. Sorry, the third clip. The second clip is the one you slide in it. A slide usually done when you are having a multiple clips lined up and this clip doesn't have an audio. let's say somebody's walking to the beat of a music and you need to line up that thing, or the sound effects of a movie that, you know, a car got crashed somewhere and there's a sound effects, you just want to put the car crash scene slightly ahead, something like that. It's very specific spots. I have a special lesson files for it, for a slip and a slide. We are out of time. I hope you guys enjoyed this session about the 3-point editing and the trim mode, and you learned something about the gang, source, and a program. As you can see, it's very, very powerful, and I use a bunch of markers. I usually teach these things. This is one of the lesson files from the Premiere class we have called the Studio Techniques Level 2. So these are not cinematic whatever. These are one of those Studio Techniques Level 2, that this is one of the lesson files. So that class is a 3-day class, and there's a lot more to it. There's no way I can fit it in a half a day or 3-hour session. I just want to make sure you guys learn a couple of things from this lesson file. Even you learn one thing from it, how to use a gang, source, and a program, I'll be very happy. Until tomorrow, if some of you come in for a tomorrow session, then you guys have a great week. And tomorrow will be Adobe After Effects, and the same thing with the 2 sessions on Friday. Until tomorrow, well, you guys have a good day. Bye-bye for now.